Well, what Irish History Live is uh, the equivalent of a museum coming to you. When you go to a museum, you get to see all the wonderful artifacts that are there, but they're all inside in a case, and you're not allowed to touch them or go near them. With Irish History Lives, I come to you with museum quality replicas of anything from Bronze Age swords to Second World War machine guns, and bring it to your school or your museum or your library or your event, and let the audience or the children handle them themselves. That way then they learn experientially. So for instance, if you're studying the Stone Age, I come to you with flint, stone axes, fur, bone, horn, leather, all these things, and you take about an hour to teach the children all about the period itself. If you say go to the Middle Ages, you might use some of the stuff that I have here, like the armour, the chainmail, the swords, the axes, the spears, the longbows, the crossbows. And then if you go for more modern periods, then what comes are the some of this stuff as well, but mostly the guns of the period. So from the earlier matchlock muskets to the later flintlock muskets, then you get a round picture of gunfire in its infancy. As we go to study modern periods with the First and Second World War, then you're talking about modern gunfire, and you're talking about pistols, rifles, machine guns, and submachine guns. And with each of these periods, the audience, which are often children, try on the helmets, put on the uniform, and take on the persona of Adolf Hitler, or Grace O'Malley, or Eamon de Valera, or Michael Collins, depending on who it is we're studying it into. And so, by doing it yourself, you learn the history far better than you can sometimes learn it out of a book or even in a museum. Well, that's the hope anyway. Something between 50 and 60 in the audience come to the show, normally, as I said, about an hour, and in that show every child in the place will get to try out one or two artifacts himself. If we're looking at Ireland of 100 years ago, well, they'll get to look at some of the tools and household implements that people used in making their normal food and fare, and the child then gets to dress up as a 19th century child, or an early 20th century man, or indeed the young lady is very fond of dressing up as the ladies of the manor from the Middle Ages. And also the Viking is a very popular thing with the young lads. They want to be a warrior from old, so that would include wigs and beards and a bit of fun and a bit of dressing up. And what it does is it taps into that part of us that we sometimes forget about, that we love to hear stories, and we love to dress up, and we love to act out the story ourselves. With children nowadays, you have a situation where they spend much of their time in front of screens, and while they can be very educational, computers and television and videos and so on, what I am doing is tapping into that which is a bit older in the child, that is to play the part, to act it out. And that way then the child gets to use all of the senses, taste, sound, hearing, and learning comes in through all the senses in every level. That way they really do get an appreciation of it. As well as that, when you dress up a child in, say, a medieval costume, then all those other children that are watching that child in the guise of a knight, let's say, and you're talking about, say, Strongbow, well then they can imagine Strongbow maybe looking a little bit like that particular child, and it gives a face to the name, so that when the teacher then is spending time representing the Middle Ages and teaching the children with the normal facilities available in a school. They can imagine to themselves what life would have been like. They can imagine Strongbow as a real person. They can imagine Cromwell as a real person. They can imagine Countess Markovich as being a real person. This is a different kind of learning. Now, it in no way will outdo a good teacher or a well thought out lesson plan and stuff like that. But what it can do is to enhance and improve the learning that a teacher may be trying to achieve. All the weapons that I have are inert or rendered safe. My swords, for instance, while they're every bit as heavy as the ancient swords would have been, they are blunt. And I am very careful in the safety aspect with children, teaching them how to handle them safely. And to date, and since the 10 years I've been in business, I've never once had a child injured. The guns are either replicas or deactivate weapons. The artillery shells and so on all have been fired. So even if you did have live ammunition available and put it into the weapon, it wouldn't shoot it, simply because it's doctored so that it won't. So in all of my 10 years in business, I never once had a single incident where a child was injured or in any way incapacitated by any of the weapons that I have. It's not always possible for a school, for instance, to get to a museum or a heritage centre. The logistics of organising a bus and where did little Johnny go and did you bring your lunch and have you got your so many euros or whatever. Whereas with me, I come to the school, do it in the classroom or in the school hall, and there's no wondering or planning any more than that, hey, Michael Moylan and Irish History Live are coming on Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning. I set up, do my shows, pack up and gone, and the school is back to where it was before I came. And this gives a teacher a great bit of flexibility then in planning events for children. Another popular event that I have, and this came again because I was doing the shows for the older children, say the 7 to 17-year-olds. With the younger children then, they're really a bit young for learning histories and so on. But what I found worked well with them was storytelling. And so I have a dozen or so very popular stories that I bring to the children to tell them. And as well as that, because I have the costumes, I bring in bags full of costumes, and the children, after I've told a story or two, can dress up as pirates or princesses or soldiers or what have you. And it's a great day out for the little kids, say from 4 years old up to 7. And that way then the entire school will get a little bit of a treat, hopefully, during that whole day. Then I began to get inquiries about other periods that the children were studying. Can you do Second World War? Can you do the First World War? Can you do 1916? Can you do the 1798 rebellions? And I would say, oh yeah, I can do that. And of course that meant me hitting the books and studying. It also meant me sourcing the replicas that I use in the show. Another aspect that this flexibility brought with it was that if there's a bit of local history in your area, like I was doing shows down in Mayo, for instance, and they were very, very interested in Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen of Ireland, and her problems with Queen Elizabeth and Lord Bingham and so on. And I had much of the costume and some of the weapons used in the period. And so with a small bit of work I was able to get ready for that show. Also the Scouts had me do a show about Baden-Powell, the original founder of the Scout movement. And so I was able to look into his history and do a show about him. And so it went that I could do shows about just about any historical period of history. Other people have asked me to do shows about their particular historical building, the Roth House in Kilkenny, Boyle Castle, and so on. that I could learn a little bit of the local history and encompass that into my usual script, and that way then not only did the children learn the general history, but the particular history of their area, and develop a kinship and a love of their own particular